Hey, everybody. My name is Meg Zabrowski, and I am a product marketer here at Scribe. And I'm so excited for today's webinar, which will dive in all about how to master informal training at your company. So, what types of questions will we answer today? So, first off, we'll start with the obvious, which is just clarifying what informal training even is. We'll talk about why it's so important, why it can be so challenging, and of course, how Scribe can help. So first off, before we dive into any of those, I wanted just to share why we're choosing this topic for our webinar. We recently ran a survey with Scribe users and asked them, of all of the use cases that you could use Scribe for, what's the number one reason that you use Scribe? And 56%, so over half of our total user base, cited informal training as the number one reason for using Scribe. So we thought that we would just take a few minutes, run a quick webinar, and educate folks on, if they're not using Scribe for informal training, how they can be using it for that. And for those who are, hopefully you can pick up a couple of tips and tricks to really master this skill. So like I said, we'll start off with what informal training even is. And to do that, I actually thought it would be most helpful to talk about what the opposite of informal training is, which is formal training. And what is formal training? It looks like this, to be honest. So we've all been there. The mandatory training held at your office, rows of chairs and people, maybe trying not to nod off. It is structured. It's driven by an instructor almost always. It follows a certain preset curriculum, and there's often tasks or some type of learning checkpoint throughout. And these trainings are certainly helpful for certain topics. However, studies show that most employee learning falls into something that they call the 70-20-10 rule. That means that employees tend to learn 70% from work experiences, 20% from interaction with colleagues, and only 10% from formal education programs, such as this one from the office. That means that formal training programs only make up 10% of an employee's total learning, leaving the other 90% to be taught through on-the-job training or informal training. All right, so now that we can really visualize what formal training is, let's go back to talking about what informal training is. And it looks like this, right? So at least in the pre-COVID days, when most everybody worked in an office, it looked like scooting your little office chair over to your desk mate, asking them to show you how to do something, peering over their shoulder as they clicked around on their computer, and you kind of watched. Our CEO, Jennifer, did a lot of this in her pre-consulting days, and she calls it shoulder surfing, which, as you can see this picture, is pretty accurate. But now that most people are working remote or even some bit of hybrid, informal training happens a lot just via Slack and Teams. You message a quick question to your teammate. Once they see it and they have time, they'll actually write out instructions. They'll send you some screenshots. They might actually send you a screen recording. Or if it's super complicated or you're really new, they actually might have you hop on a Zoom call. And so informal training, it's spontaneous in nature, meaning the questions get asked right when they need the answer. It's ad hoc or one-off, and it's always on demand. So there's a lot of benefits to this, right? So first off, it empowers employees to learn at their own pace. It helps people ask questions as they come up versus having to wait until a scheduled training session to get their answers. Second, it provides quick solutions to roadblocks. When an employee has a problem, they get to ask the question right there and then. They get a quick solution sometimes, and then they can continue on with their work. But if they don't get their question answered, they'll have to wait hours, days, or weeks until their problem is resolved. Before joining Scribe, I worked at some pretty big companies where a lot of these questions were asked via a ticketing system. And if there was some back and forth where I needed to clarify with the support agent, that could actually take weeks before I could actually get the answer I need to move on with my task. All right, and last but not least, a huge benefit of informal training is that it breaks down knowledge silos. So having a culture of informal training, it empowers people to seek answers to any question that they have, even if it's outside of their immediate scope of work. This helps knowledge really flow across organizations, no matter what team or function that you're working in. But sadly, just like in life, informal training isn't all upside. There are certainly a few challenges associated with this. First off, it can really hurt productivity. We talked about how it's great for the person with the question, right? That they can ask it right away and hopefully get their answer right away. But what about the person answering these questions? Informal training really puts undue burden on the subject matter experts or the person who owns the process, because it basically gives free rein to open the door for their days to be constantly interrupted with colleagues asking them questions. This gets even more disruptive the more tools or processes the person is responsible for, or honestly, like just the longer the person's been with the company, the more knowledge that they have, and they're kind of that go-to person for anybody with questions. And worse, studies show that every time a person's interrupted, it can take up to 30 minutes to get back into their flow of work. Super backwards, right? Because the most valuable people in your organization are the ones with all the answers. They've been there the longest, they own the most processes, they've kind of walked the walk the longest. Those are the people that are having their productivity hurt the most. Next, as I mentioned before, it is a lot easier to get help when you're seated 4 feet away from someone. When COVID happened and the world went remote, it became increasingly hard to ask just quick questions. Now, when you have a question, you have to type it out via Slack or Teams, and the person responding has to take a ton more time to show you a process because they can't just click around on their screen while you watch and furiously take notes. They actually have to make the effort to write out the instructions, record themselves on a Loom or a screen recording video, take screenshots, annotate them all. So we see in the Scribe world that these quick questions on average take someone 15 minutes to answer. That's a long time. And finally, the lack of standard operating procedures at a company can really pose some problems to an informal training culture, because you need to be really confident about the right solution or the process to pass it on to a colleague. And if everyone in the organization does things their own ways, this can pose a huge issue. So the lack of standard operating procedures, or SOPs, if you're not familiar with this term, we'll be definitely doing a whole webinar and content series on it in the future. But it's basically just writing down everything that happens at an organization so everyone can follow the same process. The lack of SOPs is a huge challenge to informal knowledge sharing, because it means that if 5 people have the question and they ask 5 different people for the answer, you're going to get 5 different answers, which could cause just huge compliance issues and just a lack of standardization across the board. So naturally, let's talk about how Scribe helps. And I'm super passionate about this particular use case because I feel like in my own world, I use Scribe all the time for just answering quick questions or even asking quick questions and having my colleagues give me the answers. So let's dive into how Scribe actually helps just you master informal training. So first, if you've made a Scribe, you'll know just how quick it is to make that Scribe. The average Scribe takes only 54 seconds to actually capture, edit, and share. So meaning you're only interrupted for 54 seconds on average before you're back into your workflow. I mentioned on the prior slides that it can take up to 30 minutes to get back into your flow of work after you've been interrupted. That number goes down the less time you spent during that interruption. So with Scribe, you're barely interrupted for less than a minute. Let's say you're going to be able to get back into what you were doing before because you've only stepped away for a minute or so to answer the question. It hasn't been the 15 minutes that we see on average. Secondly, once you've answered a question with Scribe, you can use that Scribe next time, and the next time, and the next time that you get asked that same question. All you have to do once you've gotten the question that you've already answered with the Scribe in the past, just go to your Scribe workspace, search for the Scribe you're looking for, and then you can just grab that URL and share it, and then you're off, right? Sometimes we hear people who, they can't use the same Scribe because the person needs a quick customization, or there's like a little difference in how one person does a process. No problem. All you have to do is copy the Scribe, add the edit, and now you've got 2 different versions that you can quickly send off. And lastly, I mentioned earlier that a key characteristic of informal training is that it's on demand. Scribes live on so that a learner can always access that Scribe the next time they have that question. So that means they don't have to wait to get their question answered. All they have to do is think, oh man, I forgot what step 5 was, or I forgot how to fill out this particular field on a Salesforce opportunity, something like that. There's a lot of little mini details that takes a while to actually commit to memory. So now once they have the question, they don't have to go back and bug you for the answer. They just go straight back to the Scribe, scroll down, it's all right there for them. So nobody really has to hold up their workflow. All right. So I thought it'd be helpful to put this into practice and just do a quick visualization of what this type of informal training looks like. So I'm actually going to share my screen. All right, in this particular example, my colleague Nick just asked me how to do something in Google Calendar. So I'm going to pop over to GCal and I'm going to start my Scribe recording. And then I'm just simply going to walk through the process, answering his question. I'm going to show him how to change your RSVP on an event that you've accidentally declined, and then I'm going to complete the recording. So now Scribe has done all of its magical heavy lifting on taking the screenshots and cursor clicks and following along with what I type. I'm just going to add some quick edits. I'm going to add a title here so that it can be easily found in the future. I'm just going to make sure everything looks good. And then on this particular step, I want to change the text. I don't want it to say that I decline Fitness Friday. So I'm going to add some custom text here just to make sure that this is general enough to solve Nick's question. And I'm just going to keep going through and looking. This last step was also kind of a rare occurrence, so I'll just remove that step entirely. And then I'm ready to share. I'm just going to switch to make sure the permissions are set. I'm going to copy the URL, and then I'm going to drop it back into Slack and answer Nick's question in a couple of seconds. All right, well, that is all I had planned for you today. I hope that you found some good nuggets in there and learned a lot about the benefits and the challenges of informal training programs at your company, and you feel ready and inspired to start using Scribe to make this process a whole lot easier for both you and all of the people that you're showing how to do things at work. Again, my name is Meg. I'm a product marketer at Scribe, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.